Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. My name is Adi and today we are going through what is, in my opinion, the 10 best archetypes in Regulation G, and I've got multiple rental codes for each and every one of them for you to try out as you restart your Regulation G journey. I went through all the tournaments that happened the last time we played Regulation G, kind of compiled all of my thoughts, and put them all in this one little PowerPoint style video. There's a lot to talk about today, so let's just hop right into it. I think the 10th best archetype of this format is the Groudon-based teams. We didn't see a lot of these, but we did see them here and there pop up with the occasional result. Groudon has some big weaknesses and has a lot of competition because, in particular, now unlike in the past, it has to compete with another restricted Sunsetter in Koraidon, which I think is just a little better than Groudon. It also, unlike the other restricteds with powerful spread moves like Kyogre and Terapagos and the two Calyrexes, Groudon can miss its moves. So not only do you have to outplay your opponent, win the weather war, but you also have to hit your Precipice Blades on top of that. And then finally, and this is something Koraidon shares, is that Pelipper is quite common in this format, and the Pelipper Calyrex Ice teams are really hard for Groudon to beat. So it does have some pretty big weaknesses, but it also has some major strengths, namely that Miraidon just won the World Championships, and Groudon is a Pokemon that I think has a pretty good matchup into Miraidon. It doesn't want to take those big Draco Meteors, but it can take the electric moves pretty well and fire back Precipice Blades and do a lot of damage. It also gets to enable some of the strongest Pokemon in the format that have photosynthesis, like Fluttermane and Raging Bolt, and potentially even a Walking Wake, for example. But we also see it get to really power up Chi-Yu as a powerful fire-type attacker. And so it does have those strengths as well. Some of the teams that did well with it, we saw Motoki Agano make day 2 of the World Championships, and another Japanese player, also make it to 43rd at the World Championships with Groudon. Motoki's team, of course, was one of the coolest teams to come out of the World Championships because it relied on Groudy Sableye with Sing Altaria to try to patch some of those weaknesses that this team had. It also won a Japanese grassroots tournament, and I've got the rental code for that, which is a little more standard. And it also got top 16 at Los Angeles Regionals by Modern Gamer, and he released a team report for that team. So if you want to check that out, that will be in the description down below. The number 9 archetype is, just like Groudon, it is Koraidon. It is the other Sunsetter, and it actually, I think that, I would not consider bringing Groudon to a tournament. I think that you can justify bringing Koraidon to a tournament. It's got a lot better results. I think really there are 9 restricteds that are, worth considering in this format. And Groudon does not quite make the cut. Koraidon, however, does. It does have a lot of strengths. However, I think it is also an inherent meta call because it is so weak to the Calyrex Ice Pelipper combination. I know my friend Michael Derbesi was seriously considering bringing Koraidon to Stockholm Regionals. He was trying to make it work as well as possible, and if anyone could make it work, it was Michael, and he just decided, nope, I cannot beat Calyrex Ice Pelipper with this team, with this Pokemon, and so I have to switch over to Zamazenta, and of course he won that regional with Zamazenta, so maybe a good choice. But that being said, Calyrex Ice Pelipper isn't the only team in the format. There's a lot of teams in this format, and so if you can maybe either patch that matchup, or you can make a meta call that it's not going to be as common, you could probably cover everything else with a strong Koraidon team. Like I mentioned with Groudon, it does get to enable some of the strongest Pokemon in the format, like Chi-Yu and Fluttermane and Raging Bolt. We see a Walking Wake team that won the Puerto Rico special event as well. You get to use Sunny Day with Tornadus to ensure that you have Sun up no matter what. Now, Koraidon also, much like Groudon, kind of has to Terra Fire because that's the best way for it to gain its own use of the Sun, but also because Dragon Fighting coverage is really, really bad defensively. It's quite good offensively, although it rarely uses Dragon coverage as an offensive coverage. It's really weak to Fluttermane, and Fluttermane is really good, and you also give opposing Fluttermanes the speed boost, so it gets really awkward in that respect. I think it's and also Calyrex Ice is another Pokemon that can kind of shoot you down with its ice moves. So it really struggles defensively. It's kind of a Terra Hog in that respect, but offensively, fighting fire dragon coverage is so unbelievably strong into the metagame. It really hits Zamazenta hard, it hits Terapagos hard, it hits Calyrex Ice really hard. Calyrex Shadow is not really a physically defensive Pokemon, so if you get a Flame Charge or a Scale Shot off, which is not something we've really seen a ton of, but we just kind of experienced the power of Scale Shot in Regulation H. So if you get a Scale Shot or a Speed Boost in some capacity, then you can really power through a lot of the metagames. So I think because Koraidon is a Terra Hog, and because it doesn't have great defensive typing, and also because the best Pokemon to abuse Sun are also Dragon types in Walking Wake and Raging Bolt, along with, of course, Fluttermane. You don't get to run a lot of defensive synergy on this team, but you do get a lot of really powerful offensive options, and so it's inherently kind of a hyper-offensive core. On here, we see the loaded dice version that got 24th place on Battle Stadium 1 month. We see the Puerto Rico Special Event Champion that was used a Walking Wake instead of a Raging Bolt. We see the version that Robbie used to get top 8 at the Senior World Championships, using Venusaur as well as another Sun abuser. And we also see the team that Luca used to get top 16 at Indianapolis Regionals. He also, I think, got top 32 at the North American Championships. He beat me at that tournament. And I don't think he ever released a rental code, but he was the person who I think really pushed Koraidon to its limits in this format. And I think that so he's a person to look at if you're looking for some ideas on how to keep building upon it. I think if anyone is going to figure out how to use it, it's probably Luca Dragut. Moving on to number 8, we have Zacian. Now, Zacian did have worse results than Koraidon overall, but I think that people were not using it enough. I genuinely think this Pokemon is really strong, and it only had a very small number of players actually experimenting with it and figuring out how to use it. And those people did really well over the course of the format. And so those players, I think, were Grant Weldon and Kian, who both brought it to Los Angeles Regionals. Grant got top 16 at Los Angeles Regionals, and then would go on to get top 32 at the World Championships with Zacian, whereas Kian got top 4 at Los Angeles Regionals, and I believe he also made day 2 at the World Championships, both using teams that were very similar to the teams that, both using very similar to the teams that they used at Los Angeles Regionals. And they both have very different philosophies. I think the most powerful way of using Zacian is what Kian did, where he used Terra Fairy with Play Rough. Fairy is probably the strongest neutral coverage in the format, and you just get to click Terra Fairy and hit really, really powerful Play Roughs into things. Of course, once again, you're not only using an inaccurate move like Groudon, but you're also using a single target move until you can hit into Protect or you can miss. But if you can connect with your strong Play Roughs, especially with something like a Chenpao next to it, it is really, really hard to stop. That is one of the strongest attackers in the format. And so, yeah, I think that's like the reason to use Zacian. On the other hand, we see Grant using it with Terra Ground and just Behemoth Blade, Sacred Sword, and Terra Blast, and so not relying on any inaccurate moves whatsoever, which is a more consistent way of using it. And there's also another team that got top 16 at Los Angeles Regionals that used Suicune and used Stellar Terra to power up the close combats and Play Roughs and Behemoth Blades. And so, again, I really think that there were not a ton of people experimenting with Zacian over the course of this format, but the people who did do really well. I think it's a very solid meta call, and it's maybe the Pokemon, or at least the restricted, that has the most room for innovation because it was the least experimented with. And so, yeah, I think if you're looking for something to really try to figure out how to solve, Zacian is the Pokemon that I would consider building around. However, I do think it is a little underpowered compared to some of the other Pokemon on this list, right? Like, you don't get to click Astral Barrage or Glacial Lance or Terra Starstorm with this Pokemon, and it does have some weaknesses rather over Zamazenta, which doesn't get intimidated and also has really strong physical damage output, single target physical damage output. But yeah, so I think that's like the main question is, why are you using Zacian over Zamazenta when Zamazenta also gives you a lot of room to creatively team build while doesn't have a lot of the downsides that Zacian does. That being said, people are building to beat Zamazenta, and people are not building to beat Zacian nearly as much. So as far as off-meta picks, I think Zacian might be one of the strongest options. Next up, we have Hard Trick Room, and this is why I said archetypes and not restricted Pokemon, even though this does have some unique restricted Pokemon. I think that there's a lot of different restricted Pokemon that you can use on Hard Trick Room. So namely, Calyrex Ice is the one that I think is the strongest to use on Hard Trick Room. Me and Alex both got day 2 at the North American Championships with our Hard Trick Room Calyrex Ice team. I got top 64 and he got top 16, bubbling out of top cut. And that was a really fun team to use, trying to use Smeargle to decorate our Calyrex Ice or our Ursaluna. And we have a full team report on that team. So if you want to check out that team report, you should go to the description down below, or maybe it'll be up in the footnotes as well, annotations as well. I don't know. But yeah, Calyrex Ice Hard Trick Room was really strong. The other version that did really well later on was the version that Diego Ferreira used at the World Championships. I believe he got top 32 or top 16 at the World Championships with the other Ursaluna and a very fast Calyrex Ice with Imprison to go with Indeedee, Gallade, Ogerpon, and Torkoal. And so, I think that there's a lot of different ways to build out Calyrex Ice Hard Trick Room, but at the end of the day, it is just this super bulky, super powerful threat where if it take a 1 KO, it can really overpower your opponent and also very consistently get Trick Room up because of its just incredibly strong stats. And it pairs so well with Ursaluna because the strongest attack that it's weak to are ghost type moves, and Ursaluna is a normal type. So it's very easy to get your Ursaluna in for free if you're facing down something like a Calyrex Shadow or a Lunala, which is the other really powerful Trick Room setter. Having Shadow Shield allows it to, again, very consistently take one attack and still set up Trick Room. And then you get to click Expanding Force next to Indeedee to really power it up and trying to sweep through opponents. Meteor Beam gives it a way to hit Incineroar just once, but that's all it needs, and also give it a special attack boost, which is really all it needs to potentially sweep. And so we see a couple different versions of that. The one that got top 16 at Japan Nationals, as well as the version that Brian Collins used to get, I think, 40th or something like that, top 64 at the World Championships, just one win out of top cut. And he used an Okidogi, which is really cool. I think he said he would release the team and then never did. Maybe we can get him on for a team report or something like that. I don't know. I have to ask him. Is that something you guys would want? You have to reply in the comments, right? But yeah, I think that I think that Lunala Hard Trick Room is the other version that I think is really strong. And the Dawn Wings is very similar to Lunala in that regard. It has a lower speed and a higher special attack stat, but it has a worse ability overall. And so those are the trade-offs, really, for using Dawn Wings over Lunala, but they do very similar things. And yeah, this is the Dawn Wings team that got top 8 at Japan Nationals using Lilligant Torkoal, and again, the Hisui and Ursaluna. And so, yeah, I think that's kind of the core that you have to start with Hard Trick Room is decide your restricted and decide which Ursaluna to use and then figure it out from there. But regardless of which you decide, I think that it is a really, really strong, maybe a little underexplored again, given how many different people have been doing really well with it whenever we do see it being used. It does have a lot of inherent problems. It does struggle with Amoonguss a lot, for example, which is why we put an Electabuzz on the team. It does struggle with things like opposing Trick Room teams, which is why Diego had imprisoned on his very fast Calyrex Ice, if I recall correctly. But even though there are problems to solve, when the metagame is so centralized around going faster and faster with things like Miraidon and Zacian and Calyrex Shadow, then maybe you can bust out your Calyrex Ice or your Lunala Hard Trick Room team and catch people off guard and just kind of entirely reverse the speed dynamics that people are trying to play for. The 6th best restricted, and I think this is really the start of the top tier restricteds, is Kyogre. If you ask me, there are probably 6 restrictions that you should really consider using at a tournament. And Kyogre is the bottom of them, but also is still very, very strong. I think that it was written off a little bit at the start of the format, and people slowly figured out how to use it. And I actually have 7 rental codes for this one, or 6, I guess, 7 teams that I want to talk about. The first person who really figured out, I think, Kyogre was Crystal, a Korean player who got 1st and 3rd on ladder in the same month with the Crystal Rain Screens team that uses Grimmsnarl to set up screens and then uses Leftovers, Calm Mind, Terra Grass, Kyogre with Origin Pulse and Ice Beam as his 2 attacking moves to slowly, methodically manage to beat you down. And of course, this is always inherently weak to Urshifu, which can benefit from your Rain and power up its Surging Strikes, ignore your screens, and hit you really hard. Hit you through screens, hit you through any defense boost you might get. And so the rest of the team pretty much with Amoonguss, Raging Bolt, and Rillaboom are all dedicated to slowing down Urshifu. And yeah, this is a very, very powerful team. We saw Owie, a Finnish player, use a very similar team with a Roaring Moon to get top 16 at the World Championships. And again, like, I think that this is the bottom tier of the restricted that I would need to have a matchup into going into a tournament to feel comfortable. Like, if I didn't have a Zacian or a Koraidon matchup, I'd be like, yeah, I can just dodge it. It's not going to be super high usage. They're certainly strong, but they're not the most important matchups to have. Kyogre is a team that I would need to have a matchup against because of how well it did at Worlds with Owie and on ladder, but also at the North American Championships, where there was 2 in top 8. And the other version, the really slow, methodical version that I like, is the Assault Vest version. Again, it is Terra Grass, and this time instead of having Calm Mind, it has Assault Vest to do a little more initial, immediate damage. Terra Grass is really good into Miraidon. Terra Grass AV with your incredible special defense stat allows you to tank those attacks really well, fire off attacks back at it. And Wochen allows you to tank the physical attacks a little better. And of course, Shiliang Tang, who used this team to get top 8, had a really cool interaction where it's actually fast Wochen and slow Kyogre, so you can Pollen Puff to heal off any damage you took, and then get your big water spouts off to guarantee some knockouts, which is another really cool interaction. Of course, this team also has screens, also has the Incineroar Safety Goggles Incin, but is also using Urshifu and Iron Jugulus as a little more of an aggro mode rather than entirely opting into setting up very slowly like the Crystal Screen Drain team is. And then the other two versions I wanted to talk about on this page are the more aggressive versions. So Basculin Legion got top 32 at the World Championships, and I have a team report with Daniel Arcane, where he talks about this team. If you are really missing Basculin Legion after Regulation H, fear not, it is still viable as a Swift Swim user. He is also using the Assault Vest Kyogre team with Tornadus and Urshifu as a way to benefit from rain, and a way to consistently keep your rain up with Tornadus, of course. Landorus can benefit from Sandseer Storm, and then Sarita to block priority because you are Assault Vest and you can't really afford to take a bunch of Fake Outs when you don't have Fake Out plus damage, when you don't have screens or Amoonguss or stuff like that, right? Or Wochen, I guess. And so, yeah, really relying on that as it's more of an offensive version of these Kyogre teams. And then the other version that did really well was the version that got top 4 at Japan Nationals with Terra Ice Blizzard with Snowscape Tornadus. More of a best of 1 gimmick. I would not want to run this in best of 3, but it is a really, really cool take on Kyogre on ladder, and I think this was one of the most exciting moments of Japan Nationals when we were watching it, was to see the Terra Ice Snowscape Blizzard just take 2 knockouts. It was absolutely insane. So, if we're playing the grand challenges, the fact that Kyogre can run so many sets is another reason to potentially consider it for these best of 1 tournaments. And then the other versions, again, I mentioned it did really well towards the end of the format at Japan Nationals, at the North American Championships, and at the World Championships. Shout out to Cedric for recreating the Slowking team that Daniel Walker used to make day 2 of the World Championships. That's why you got his face in the corner. He's a fantastic content creator, Talon. And so definitely recommend you follow him as well. That team using Scarf Kyogre with the trigger mode with Slowking and Didi as like a Psy Spam mode, and the neutralizing gas wheezing to turn off prankster weather users and stuff like that. Make sure you can't overwrite Kyogre's weather, and then just click fat water spouts. Very, very cool take on the team. No idea how it works. It's still, but if you want to try it out, you should try it out. It's a cool looking team. And then the other 2 versions that, again, were a little more aggressive. We see the Scarf version that got top 32 at Japan Nationals by Yuki Rotom. And I think there's a team report for that as well that'll be linked in the description. It is in Japanese, but you can Google translate it pretty effectively. Again, Scarf Kyogre, very powerful in the best of 1 format, I think, when people are maybe not expecting it as much. And then the version that Henry Rich used to get top 8 at the North American Championships. He beat me at that tournament, and we have a team report together as well. Again, it'll be linked in the description if you want to watch that team report, where he talks about why he chose to use Overquill as the Swift Swim abuser of choice, which I thought was really strong, especially into the Calyrex Shadow Clefairy metagame that we were leaving at that time. That was a really cool meta choice. And again, yeah, just using big damage plus Swift Swim user plus Landorus, again, to beat Miraidon. I think it's one of the best choices that Kyogre teams can use to beat Miraidon if you're not like Assault Vest Terra Grass. And yeah, just the team comes together really well. It's a really powerful option. And I think that with options like Overquill and Basculin Legion, options like Choice Scarf, and on the other hand, you can use things like Calm Mind or Screens or Assault Vest on your Kyogre. You could either go really fast-paced and throw out a lot of damage with this Pokemon, or you can go very slow and, just kind of slowly, methodically grind your opponent out with Pollen Puffs and with Screens and with Calm Minds and whatever. And so it's just a very diverse Pokemon. It's a Pokemon that I think a lot of us wrote off at the start of the format, but I think it is one of the big 6 restricted right now that you really have to game plan for going into the second part of Regulation G. Moving on to number 5, we have Terapagos, and this was the another one of the Pokemon that I think is going to be a menace in closed team sheet because it can run so many different sets. And so the first version that I want to talk about is the team that won Japan Nationals, and I would not run this in open team sheet best of 3, but in closed team sheet best of 1, this team was super, super cool, using Meteor Beam to power itself up. That part you can use in best of 3 open team sheet. I think there was a version that got top 16 at Indianapolis Regionals that had Power Herb Meteor Beam, but this version also has Rock Polish to try to punish people, to maybe who maybe want to, they say, I know this guy has Meteor Beam. I'm going to protect on the Meteor Beam. And then, nope, he actually rock polished on you. So that was super cool to see. Again, it won Japan Nationals. And I think that when we go into these grand challenges, we're going to see a lot of wild and wacky Terapagos sets trying to use it in so many different ways. And yeah, so that's something that's to look out for. The other 3 versions on here are all combines. There is the Comfey version that used Comfey to heal yourself back up, keep your multi-scale-esque ability, your Terra Shell, intact, while also giving you a huge HP boost if you do end up going for the big Terra on Terapagos to give yourself a bigger HP boost as well. And so that version is really cool. I really like Comfey. It's one of my favorite Pokemon. The first team report ever on this channel was a Comfey Gudra Lapras team report all the way back in 2020. So I'm very nostalgic for this Pokemon. And Rillaboom giving it a 75% healing on a Pokemon as bulky as Terapagos makes it really, really difficult to KO. But this Terapagos does have Watch Its Friends Die syndrome, where it watches its friends die, as do I think a lot of the combined variants. The other 2 variants I wanted to talk about were the version that got second place at the Lima special event with Volcarona by Sebastian. And I think that the winner of that event also used Terapagos Volcarona, if I recall correctly. They didn't release a rental code. But yeah, I think that was a version that was really popular in the LATAM region that never really picked up outside of LATAM, but I think it's a really cool partner for the combine variants. And there was also the version that got top 8 at the World Championships that had Substitute as its flex move. So you can see that Nikyu Alex ran Flamethrower and that Sebastian ran Earth Power as the flex move, but instead people started to use Terra Starstorm as its only move because it can hit everything. You just have to Terra very effectively with it, choosing if you want to use your normal type single target Terra Starstorm without Terraing, and then maybe a Ghost type comes on the field and you are more susceptible to Wide Guard if you Terra. And so it's a little easier to pin down, but that being said, Substitute makes it so difficult to knock out, especially with Grassy Terrain healing and Leftovers healing. You can get your Terra Shell back, and at that point, breaking the Substitute on its own is just a difficult challenge on its altogether, right? And so another interesting version of it that did very well at the World Championships that you should definitely consider. But you can also use Choice Specs, and I couldn't find a good rental code for the Choice Specs variant. It got second at the North American Championships. I know the building group that included Nails, who got top 8 at Indianapolis Regionals, and Junshi, who got 33rd, I believe, at North American Internats, and Aurelian, who got second at North American Internats. I don't think they ever released a rental code, but they were the main people championing the Choice Specs version of the team. And that team was also really strong. I definitely recommend that you check out the version that got second place at NAIC, even though you don't have EV spreads for that, as another way of building Terapagos, because I think it is one of the better way of building Terapagos. And again, going into the Grand Challenge, you have to deal with all 3 of these Terapagos versions without knowing which one you're facing, which is going to be a big challenge. So yeah, looking forward to that. 4th, we got Zama Zenta, and Zam also went through a really interesting arc over the course of this format. Because I think at the very start of the format, a lot of people were trying to build it like the Tinglu Zamazenta team that I have on here, where they were using Iron Defense to boost up your body press damage. They had Tinglu to boost up your special defense. Maybe you have Screen, something like that. And this version really fell off. I think the only people who at the very start of the format really understood how Zamazenta was supposed to be played, I would say, is Michael Zhang, who built the team that Michael Derbesti used to win Stockholm Regionals, who was also built, or shouldn't say built the team, but he heavily inspired the team that Diego used to get top 16 at the World Championships and that won Taiwan Nationals. All of these are very heavily inspired by Michael. And let me explain to you why Iron Defense Body Press is bad on Zamazenta. And the reason for that is because you already start with your +1 defense boost. So if you click Iron Defense and you get a +2 boost, you're only going to a 2.5x multiplier from the 1.5x multiplier, which is only a 66% boost in damage output. It's a 166% boost in damage output, as compared to if you click Iron Defense with maybe like a Komodo, you're getting a 200% boost in your damage output, right? And so this is closer to clicking Defense Curl than it is to clicking Iron Defense with a normal Pokemon, which is why the damage boost is really not worth it. You're already doing so much damage, and instead you get to leverage Wide Guard to really use some very unique Pokemon to try to power through your opponents. So, for example, Latios, if you have if you have Wide Guard on Zamazenta next to it, it walls Calyrex Ice, right? You can't glacial into it, and you can't high horsepower it. And so you get to trade damage really effectively with the partners of the Calyrex Ice. And then, and if they put Incineroar next to it, you get to body press it, right? So those are the type of cool interactions. Same with like Landorus is another Pokemon that does the exact same thing. We see Chandelure as a cool way of beating the Calyrex Shadow teams. Again, they can't Astral Barrage you if you have Wide Guard pressure. And so if they're clicking things like Draining Kiss, your Chandelure doesn't really care, right? And so again, I think that this is a way to leverage some really cool Pokemon and use your unique immunities and the combination of unique immunities and Wide Guard to basically play singles is what Michael has described it as. And so I think it took everyone else a little while to really figure out what Michael figured out towards the start of the format. And I think that since then, I think now that people have really figured out that this is the way to run it, that you don't need Iron Defense, you really just want Wide Guard to beat these oppressive Calyrexes, to beat Terapagos. You already do quite well into Terapagos, another big reason to use Zamazenta. But to beat those guys, you get to really use its full toolkit, and it's just a very unique Pokemon in that regard. You can see that there are some cool choices as a result of its unique toolkit. I don't think you can run like Moltres or Chandelure or Latios on any other style of team. But it also does have some big weaknesses. I think Miraidon is really difficult in general. You need to use a lot of your partner Pokemon. We see the Landorus, for example, the Rillaboom on the other teams to help deal with Miraidon. But yeah, I think that Zam is one of the strongest restricted Pokemon. And now that everyone, the cat's out of the bag, Michael Derbesti also got top 4 at the World Championships with it, with a version that is quite similar to the versions that we see at the top. Now that the cat's out of the bag on how to use it effectively, I think we're going to see more people build around it and try to figure out what unique choices you can put next to it to really optimize its matchup spread, because it is just such a unique Pokemon. It does something that no other restricted Pokemon really does. It's like almost a support Pokemon. Its job is to KO Incineroar and click Wide Guard in some respects, and then throw out really strong neutral damage, but enable these very, very powerful partner Pokemon. Whereas other restricted Pokemon, you almost always have all these support Pokemon next to it trying to allow it to take all the knockouts. It's just a really unique style of play. And so I hope to see more of it, and I hope to see more people picking it up and using it. And you get figuring out these weird combinations that you can really use to leverage Zamazenta's unique toolkit. Next up, we got Calyrex Shadow Rider, and this is what I think is the start of the big 3 restricteds in the format. I said there were 6 restricteds that I would really not want to have a bad matchup into going into a tournament, but really there are 3 Pokemon that I think are ahead of all the other ones, and you can guess what they are if you haven't already. These are the big 3 in the format, in my opinion, and Calyrex Shadow Rider is the first of those 3. It is certainly the one that has the worst results. I think people really wrote it off before Los Angeles Regionals, and then it won Los Angeles Regionals and won by Montana Mott. And of course, I used it at Los Angeles Regionals as well. I got top 4. I have a team report on my channel where I talk about that. We had almost the same team. And I think that the Calyrex Shadow, Rillaboom, Urshifu, Incineroar, Raging Bolt core, maybe not Raging Bolt necessarily, but certainly those first 4 were really, really common on a lot of different teams. I think Wolf ran the same 6 Pokemon as me at Worlds with Farigiraf over the Clefairy slot. And Mont had the same 5 Pokemon with the Tornadus over the Raging Bolt. So the Fire, Water, Grass combo next to Calyrex was really strong, using bunch of different ways to set it up, be it Nasty Plot, be it Nasty Plot, be it Calm Mind, be it just clicking Astral Barrage and taking knockouts, right? You can do a lot of different things with this Pokemon. And so, yeah, I think, Calyrex Shadow, really, really strong Pokemon. Before Los Angeles, people were writing it off because people were using like Psyshock, Astral Barrage, which is still a very reasonable set to run, but does kind of lose to Incineroar. And now it is, now people are using the other sets to set it up. I think Draining Kiss was a really good call at the time with Terra Fairy, but we also see, just a bunch of other options now. Again, in Best of 1, this Pokemon is devious because it can run so many different sets. And so, yeah, I don't know. Calm Mind was a set that I preferred personally. I think it gave me a better matchup into Terapagos and a better matchup into Miraidon. Let me really consistently beat those guys. But and that being said, it was worse into Calyrex Ice, where you really want a Nasty Plot to immediately exert KO pressure, and you really want I think you really want Nasty Plot and Fast into the mirror match as well. So those were some of the trade-offs, in my opinion, for those. And again, if you want to listen to me talk for like 45 minutes about Calyrex Shadow and all the intricacies of the Calyrex Shadow decision-making process and team building, you can go watch my team report. I should probably stop talking about that version specifically. The other versions that were really cool were the versions that did well at Japan Nationals. This one had a Focus Sash. Again, devious in close team sheet. Your opponent thinks they're taking a easy knockout with a very powerful single target move, and instead, what do you know? You're living on one. You have Disable to stop them. You have Encore to lock them into it. You only really need Astral Barrage on this guy with all these other cool versions. And this one has a Grassy Seed Body Press Cabalion to KO Incineroar, I guess, which is also just a cool option. So again, this is maybe a more best of one closed team sheet oriented option because Japan Nationals was best of one closed team sheet until top 8. But yeah, I mean, just another like cool approach to it, just showing the Focus Sash is also very viable on this Pokemon. Life Orb is very viable. I think this is the version you're going to see the most at the start of the format because it got top 16 at the World Championships by Justin Knox. If you want to hear about that one, I also have a team report with Justin talking about that team that's linked in the description down below. So I definitely recommend that you try to watch that if you want to hear all the intricacies about how that team works. Notably, that team gets to click Expanding Force with Indeedee, which I think is one of the other really powerful ways of using Calyrex Shadow as a more hyper offensive Pokemon. This one using Weezing and Dindozo and Urshifu as its partners. Although I think that you could also run Calyrex Shadow Indeedee without those guys. It does have inherent problems, namely with things like Incineroar, right? But I still think that it's just one of the strongest ways to actually run that team. And yeah, the last version I want to talk about was the Choice Specs version. That, again, it's just the other really strong hyper-offensive version that you see got 26th on the Battle Stadium ladder. If you look at that team, it is the same 6 Pokemon. It's not quite the same 6 Pokemon. Sorry. Montana had a Clefairy over the Raging Bolt. But, yeah, it's like, again, it looks like the standard Balancey team. You don't know if it's clicking Nasty Plot. You don't know if they're clicking Combine. All of a sudden, instead, they're clicking Choice Specs Astral Barrage, and they're taking a knockout. And you Terra Ghost, like, you're just a goner, right? So, that's the scary part about Calyrex Shadow is that it's so many different sets that it can run on so many different styles of team. And I didn't even get to mention all of them. So some of the other ones that I didn't get to mention, there's a lot of other redirection users that you can use. Edu used Smeargle to get top 8 at the North American Championships. That was a version that was really popular around that time as well. The Amoonguss version was really popular for a little bit. And Ogerpod Heartflame also made day 2 of the World Championships with Calyrex Shadow by my good friend Zach Drudgecamp. That'll be that I don't have space on it for on screen right now, but that'll be in the description if you want to check out that rental code as well. And then, yeah, like I said, you can use Indeedee without Dindozo as another redirection option. You really can use any redirection you want if you build around it correctly. And then, like I mentioned, the version that Montana used had Nasty Plot with Tornadus as more of an offensive version that still had the same Balancey core. And so, yeah, just so many options in terms of setup moves, in terms of item choices, in terms of redirection partners. It's just a really strong Pokemon. The one thing that all of these teams do have on them is Urshifu Water, because Urshifu Water with Calyrex Shadow is just one of the strongest pins in the format. And so that is really my starting point if I'm building a Calyrex Shadow team is Calyrex Shadow, Urshifu. And then you have so many different options for those last 4 slots. Number 2 is Calyrex Ice Rider. This is, the other Calyrex bro that has a stupid powerful spread move that can just hit really, really hard. And oh man, it's so strong. There's a bunch of different ways to run it, but at the end of the day, almost everyone is running a clear amulet on it. I say that, but we do see the one version that was 60th on ladder, top 60 on the end of season ladder with Sentret. That's a little more of a fun version. I saw it on Cybertron's channel. If you're playing less of one, you don't necessarily have to run that. Also, Nevermelt Ice picked up a little bit at the World Championships as Incineroar usage dropped, saying, 25-30% usage. I can take the extra damage boost in 70% of the matchups, right? And figure out how to deal with Incineroar in the other matchups. And so my building group with Alex Underhill and Justin Birds used that, and Alex made day 2 Worlds with Nevermelt Ice, Calyrex Ice. And then also I think Hirofumi Kimura, I forget if I think he got top 32 at the World Championships with his own Nevermelt Ice, Calyrex Ice. And so that is another option to run, but certainly Clear Amulet is the most standard item that you should expect to see on it. And if Incineroar usage goes back up, then it certainly almost has to be the standard, because this Pokemon is otherwise very weak to Incineroar. It really just wants to click Glacial Lance, and Incineroar can switch into Glacial Lance a little too easily, especially if there is an Intimidate onto this Calyrex Ice. So some of the variants that I wanted to talk about, I think there's, really 3 variants that are worth, that's probably 4. But the 4th version that I don't get to put on screen is the Instant Amoonguss version that was popularized by Justin Burns and Ryan Haig. But they never released a rental code, so that version I don't have on here. but you should definitely be ready for the instant Amoonguss Calyrex Ice version. It's probably the most slowest methodical version of the team, and is very similar to the way it ran in 2022. On the other hand, the other versions, we see Navjeet getting top 8 at the World Championships with the Regieleki and Calyrex Ice. We call that the Bolt Beam Speed Sandwich. That was really popular in 2022 as well. Regieleki has since been nerfed, but still having that electric ice pin is really, really strong, the Bolt Beam combo. So he used that to a really strong finish, and I have a team report with him out on the channel if you want to watch his thoughts on how he used his team and how he built his team. I also have a team report with Patrick Connors, who got, of course, won the North American International Championships, and with his Rain Calyrex Ice. And this is the version that I said was such a boogeyman for so many different teams. We also see a different take on Rain Calyrex Ice getting second place at the World Championships with Iron Valiant. It also got second place at the Japan National Championships with Iron Valiant, which is really cool to see. That is turning into one of the strongest partners for Calyrex Ice. But yeah, I think Rain plus playing Rain plus Urshifu plus Calyrex Ice is just, again, I mean, this is why if you watch my other videos, I keep complaining about Urshifu. I mean, look at all these teams, man. They all got an Urshifu on them. It's so oppressive. It's such a easy pin to put next to almost every restricted Pokemon. But I digress. Yeah, Calyrex Ice, Pelipper, Urshifu, one of the strongest ways to run it, for sure, no doubt. And we see both the version that won the North American Championships and the version that got second place at the World Championships, leveraging those options. And of course, I do have a team report with Patrick and with Navjeet if you want to watch either of those. Finally, actually not finally, well, we have one more. So before I go into the best restricted, which you can probably guess at this point, I did want to highlight some of the weirder teams in the format. Sadly, no actual weirder, but there's a few other archetypes that I think are cool that I wouldn't necessarily say are worth consider. I wouldn't ever bring these to a tournament, but they're fun. They're certainly they're cool options. And so a couple of them. First off, there was the other Lunala team that got top 8 at Japan Nationals. I mentioned I thought Psy-Spam was the best way to run it, but this version used Calm Mind and used I guess it didn't have a recovery move. It just had a Rillaboom. But you can use Calm Mind and Moonblast and Terra Fairy and Moongas Beam as a really powerful combination of attacking options to slowly power yourself up. Use a Pokemon like Umbreon and Rillaboom and Iron Jugulus, I guess, to really slow the game down in some ways. So it's of course a team that was built for best of 1 closed team sheet. So take that with a grain of salt. But I think Lunala does have some potential with Calm Mind. I just think it is weaker than Calyrex Shadow with Calm Mind. So you really have to know why you're using Lunala over Calyrex Shadow. And I think if you're not using it on a hard Trick Room Psy-Spam team, you probably should just be using Calyrex Shadow. So there's that. The next team that I could talk about is the Lugia Muck team. This is the version that my friend Dakota used to get to go 5-4 at the North American Championships. So I had a winning record. You are a bad person if you use this team. Sorry, Dakota, it's just true. And so yeah, but if you really feel like making some enemies on a given day, you can queue up with Lugia and Power of Alchemy Muck with Moody Smeargle and make people's lives miserable. The other version that I think is actually quite cool is the version that Ian got top 64 at Los Angeles Regionals with as what we call Lost Box. This is because Sableye Comfey was a archetype in the TCG that people call Lost Box, but it also happens to be a potent combination in VGC where you set up screens with your Sableye and you heal Pokemon with your Comfey. And Lugia, we saw the Terapagos version of that team earlier, but Comfey can also benefit Lugia with Multiscale instead of Terra Shell. And this was kind of devious. I played this at Los Angeles when I got top 4. I played this at 6-0, and it was a scary matchup because Aeroblast can get critical hits. And so it really came down to whether or not he crit my Calm Mind Calyrex Shadow with an Aeroblast on the right turn. He never did, thankfully. But, oh my god, this team is terrifying. So yeah, I think this is another really cool take on the Comfey screens type archetype that we saw earlier. Again, I do think Terapagos is just a little better at doing it than Lugia, but Lugia is also a cool way of using it, and Ian did quite well at Los Angeles Regionals with it. And then the last restricted that I wanted to highlight that I think has some potential, certainly not top 12, but I think it has some potential, is Rayquaza. Now with Terra Normal, it can do the Dragonite thing and Terra Normal E-Speed to do big damage. And it has Swords Dance potentially, or it can run Choice Band. When boosted by Chien-Pao, it's just hitting super hard. And so I do think it has some pretty big weaknesses, right? It's still a single target move. Normal is not the best typing in a offensive typing in a metagame with Calyrex Shadow. With Calyrex Ice is going to be a big pain for Rayquaza to power through, and it just hits it really hard. But I did see some success very early in the format. I think Toller top cut a Victory Road tournament with it in the very start of the format. And so this is the rental code that I could find by the main events. I think main event and Moxie Boosted made it together. And I have a link to their video down in the description as well. So yeah, that's like another cool Pokemon that you could consider running. Again, I would consider it maybe for a grand challenge or something like that when people don't know what set you're running. Remember, this guy can run Scale Shot too. It can be just a Proto Dragonite, right? But and it does get to mess with the weather setters a little bit if you're worried about facing down Kyogres and Koraidons and Groudons. Like, it probably can do pretty well into those guys. So I don't know. It's got some interesting choices that it can use, but I would not bring this to a tournament. It is probably just worse than Groudon, right? And so that makes it the 11th, 12th best restricted. Like, Dawn Wings is probably better than it too, right? So yeah, maybe Lugia is better than it. Like, but it's an option, and it does have one very unique thing that it can do, and that merits talking about in the other section. And that's going to do it for the other section. Let's talk about the best restricted in the entire format, which that is Miraidon. Miraidon, of course, coming off of a World Championship win. And we got to talk about the team that won the World Championships, right? That is called Arubega Miraidon. It also got top 8 at the World Championships with the Dark Urshifu version. And I think I have a rental code for that one in the description as well. So that is a team that was originally made by a Japanese player who goes by Arubega as their handle. And yeah, it's really strong. Everyone knew about it going into Worlds, and it still won the World Championships because it is, and again, got top 8 at the World Championships because it is that powerful. If you're looking for a team that is never going to go out of style, that you can pick up and use for the entire format and just really become an expert at, I think this is the team that you can pick up and use with so few adjustments. You don't need to make many adjustments to it. Here and there might be things that you might want to change. The flex moves on Whimsicott, flex moves on items on Farigiraf, something like that. I don't know. But there's not a ton to change. The team is just so powerful. Using Iron Hands as a way to use your Cork Drive boost and get these really powerful boosted Wild Charge offs, get low kicks off that hits so much of the format off. Just really hard. I don't know, man. Electric Seed for Farigiraf is really strong. And then Choice Specs Miraidon just is such a murder button. It KOs everything with Volt Switch, much less Electro Drift. And you can even use Terra Fairy Dazzling Gleam. So yeah, I mean, geez, a Miraidon, just, a really powerful Pokemon, won the World Championships. And if I were building for San Antonio Regionals, this would be my number one team to beat. I would need to know how to beat this team before I run any team, even consider any team. I would start by, how do I play into the Arubega Miraidon team? And then the other version that I could talk about is the version that won Indianapolis Regionals, Rajan Ball. Of course, he is a good friend of mine, and we have a team report with him on the channel. So if you want to watch that will be linked in the description down below. And I think that this team is a little outdated, but it does have some really powerful pieces that he figured out before anyone else did. Namely, one, people were not running Choice Specs on Miraidon. That is obviously the way to run it, I think. You see Electric Seed on Farigiraf, which I think is just one of the strongest tools that it can have, because that is like genuinely one of the most annoying things for Calyrex Ice to deal with is Electric Seed for Farigiraf. And so it's just a really powerful option into that team with Foul Play, and we see that being adapted as well. Ogerpon Rock was really common at the World Championships, not necessarily on Miraidon specifically, but it was just, I think, one of the standouts for me at Worlds. And it's just, again, in a format so powerful, having Sturdy is really good, and having Rock coverage into Calyrex Ice. Maybe it's because I'm a Calyrex Ice player, and I had to deal with all these Rock Ogerpons that could tank a Glacial Lance and hit me with Irie Cudgel back. Oh, it's so annoying. And so I think that's just also a really powerful option as well. That, Heartflame maybe a little better on this style of team, but yeah, I think that you can also run Rock Pond quite effectively. And then Whimsicott, again, being the classic partner, using Tailwind and Encore to, I'm going to protect on their Volt Switch, and then I'm going to call them out. And nope, you're just going to get Encore. It is just a pain in the butt to deal with. So yeah, like Rajan really laid the groundwork for how to run Miraidon. And I think that the Arubega version is a little more topical, but you can take a lot of ideas from both of them and see if you can build your own version of Miraidon that is capable of tackling the ways that people try to take on Arubega Miraidon as the format progresses. The other two versions that I want to talk about are This version that got second place on Battle Stadium Ladder, again, this is more of a best of one focused version, but it uses Iron Leaves, which is super cool because I've never seen this Pokemon being used successfully until now. Yeah, using Psyblade and Cork Drive with it, and Psyblade getting an electric terrain boost as well. It's just a really cool take on the Pokemon. Yeah, it's just a cool option for maybe something like a Grand Challenge. We see Electric Seed on Iron Hands as well to maybe give you some turns to set it up with the Swords Dance. So that's another like cool little tech that we see that really only works in closed team sheet. And then we also see the version that got top 8 at the World Championships. And that version has Dondozo. And I think Dondozo in general was quite a good call at Worlds. We saw the top 16 version with Calyrex Shadow, but we also see it working really well with Miraidon. And because you have this other mode, and because you have Choice Specs and Choice Band and Choice Scarf on all of you have all the choice items, you get a flex slot for your Miraidon item, and so you get to run Assault Vest on it too. And so that's another really cool way of running Miraidon. But yeah, overall, I would say that Miraidon, #1 threat in the format. Really, the big 3 threats, I think, are all things that you really have to consider in Miraidon, Calyrex Ice, and Calyrex Shadow. Those are like the big 3, in my opinion. And honestly, the big 6, man, there's 6 teams. If you can't, you need to know your matchup into all 6 of those. But man, I would really not want to have a bad matchup into Arabega Miraidon when so many people are going to be running this team. And it is right now, definitively, undisputably, the strongest team in the format. And with that, I want to give some shout outs to some people. First off, shout outs to all of my channel members who, this isn't possible without you guys. I really appreciate all of your support. If you want my, I know a lot of people are channel members because they want my dynamic speed tiers. If you watch my Calyrex Shadow team report, I talk about how I use the data from the Pokemon Showdown stats to speed creep everyone effectively, and I make that data very easy to use and available to all of my channel members. So if you are interested in that, or if you're interested in supporting the channel, I would really appreciate it if you not only liked and commented and subscribed. Obviously, that part's free. I would really appreciate that as well. But also for $5 a month, you can become a channel member and get access to that little data visualization and support me. And yeah, you know how it goes. And then also I want to give a shout out to VGC Paste and LabMouse, who I really used as a great, both of these guys were fantastic resources for this, because LabMouse has a fantastic search function that allowed me to just kind of search through all the teams, filter teams based on the Pokemon that they use to try to find the version that I remember being really strong and help me really rank these all the powerful restricted Pokemon that you just saw. And then VGC Pastes was the other resource that I used. They have a repository of teams. You can see which ones have rental codes, which ones don't. And so that was another way for me to find all these teams. And again, I really recommend that you check these guys out if you are looking for inspiration, maybe looking for a team that wasn't on this list or isn't in the description down below, where I have a huge ass list of teams. If you're looking for one of those, if you're looking for a team that isn't in that huge ass list of teams, definitely recommend you go to one of these 2 guys. And yeah, that's going to do it for me. Thank you all for watching. And I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you guys learned something. I hope you have some inspiration going into the new Regulation G Part 2. And until next time, I will see you all later.